Well, howdy y'all. Welcome to Once Upon a Time in Texas. This is episode number 80. I never thought I'd make it this far, but here we are, and I'm really about to miss it. I'm doing this at 9:40 on Tuesday night, and I usually like to post my podcasts to be out at 5 a.m. on Wednesday. So, it's just been a really busy day, I guess, and usually I try to do these on Tuesdays, and today it just didn't work out. I went to city council. I got to present because I am the chair for the city revitalization committee, but we were last on the agenda, so that means we had to sit there for about 3.5 hours before we got to present. And boy, oh boy, was it an interesting city council meeting today. It was just wild. There was lots of talk about concrete and thickness and roads. And apparently this is a topic of conversation that's been going on for like 9 months, something like that. And they finally voted on it and put it to bed today. Some people were pleased and some people were pissed. But it is what it is. So, Labor Day was kind of fun. So first and foremost, Friday night was the very first marching band performance during the very first football game for the new Memorial High School. And the band did great. The football team did great. I'm not a huge football guy. Don't come and talk to me about sports and stuff like that. It's just not my thing. But it was nice that the team won. Then Saturday we get up early and we go out and we put out Rotary flags. Me and the kids went out and put out a little over 60 flags, kind of all across the city. And that's always a fun thing. Put it up for Labor Day. The weather has just been super nice lately, super pleasant. We kind of had a cold front come in and it's getting up to the the upper 80s during the day. Which, my gosh, is just pleasant. Absolutely pleasant. Spent a little time working on the wife's car. She's got a Ford Expedition, and it started throwing a code for a misfire on cylinder number 8. And that's when it occurred to me that I had never changed out the spark plug. So at 121,000 miles, I had to do that, and I went ahead and changed out the ignition coils too, and that was an expensive little venture, but it is what it is. But on the same day, she also has a flat, and so I had to go help her change a flat at the Dollar Tree, and then I get to looking at the tires, and I thought, man, I was kind of hoping we could make another 6 months, but this screw was at a position where you just really couldn't fix it, and the other rear tire was pretty worn down. The front two looked, okay. So I'm going to keep those because they also fit daughter number 1's truck and daughter number 2's truck. So we're going to hang on to those just in case we need another tire at some point. During the spring, we had a bunch of rain, and it actually got bad enough that it started washing out the dam on my parents' pond, one of them, out at the ranch that I've talked about before. And so we had to wait for the water levels to go down, and then it was just so blasted hot, and finally it was a nice weekend, and so Dad went and bought 6,600 pounds of concrete in a bag. The 60-pound bags, and moved a whole boatload of those, kind of built the dam back up to where it won't wash out next time, but that was a lot of work. Certainly got a little sweaty that day. Helped a buddy change out some brake pads. Labor Day is supposed to be relaxing and, basically honor those that labor a lot, I guess. I don't know. And turns out I spent more time doing labor over the weekend than I had in a long time. But you know what? That's okay. So you know what? This is going to be a little shorter podcast this week, but that's okay. Have you ever wondered about animals that used to roam Texas? Have you ever really thought about it? Like most people, if you ask them, would say buffalo. And of course, you're right. Buffalo bison, actually, American bison, used to roam all over the United States. Not so much East Coast, but they were there, mostly in the plains. I mean, really from Mexico all the way up into Canada. And we all know about those buffalo and how they were kind of slaughtered out and how they're kind of making a comeback due to breeding and stuff like that. And of course, we raise bison at our small ranch in Henrietta, Texas. And if you know somebody who wants to buy some, we've got some that we need to sell. But anyway, there were other animals. Some died out or migrated away, and I just thought, this would be kind of cool to take a look at some of those. So as always, before we jump into this, I want to thank our sponsors. That's me and Victory Home Loans. I know there are tons of people moving to and in Texas and Oklahoma. And I know a lot of y'all do too, so let me help them out. Send them on over to talk to me, the great, the wonderful Mike Mitchell, who does this Once Upon a Time in Texas podcast. Send them over to themichaelmitchell.com, T-H-E, michaelmitchell.com. And remember, when you work with me in Victory Home Loans, we sell dreams, not mortgages. So where did this week's idea come from? Well, I was just looking for inspiration on Texas history and just typed in wild Texas history, thinking that would just pull up some weird stuff. And the first thing that popped up was a website called wildtexashistory.com. And, well, we have a podcast, guys. So the website's pretty cool. It's got a whole bunch of articles, like original OG articles from newspapers all over the state about these animals that used to roam. But first, I want to hit on a few dates in the history of Texas that you may or may not know. That the guy who started this website, and kudos to him, put together. And so I really like this. So 1528, after surviving a shipwreck, Cabeza de Vaca becomes the first Spaniard to explore the Texas interior. 1632, the first Spanish mission is established near present-day San Angelo. 1718, the San Antonio Mission is founded. So we're going back a little bit, so it's not necessarily about animals yet, but hold with me. 1722, during the remainder of the day, we passed through a flat country and found a great many deer. We saw around us, almost at the same time, as many as 300 or 400 of these animals. And that was written by Juan Antonio de la Peña in Medina County, way back 1722. 1828, during our march, we encountered vast herds of buffalo. That was Jean-Louis Berlandier in Kerr County. 1836, the Texas gains independence from Mexico. We all know about that. 1846, it is a shame how hundreds of deer are killed and left lying. That was written by Victor Brock of New Braunfels. 1850, the first railroad in Texas is established. 1853, one Waco trading post shipped 75,000 deer hides to New York, in addition to many bear and buffalo pelts, over 7 years. Isn't that crazy? 75,000 deer hides. 1861, Civil War breaks out and lasts for 4 years. 1877, the San Antonio Herald reports on a 2-week hunt by 2 men north of Fort Clark Springs. They killed 3 bears, 67 deer, 219 turkeys, 4 geese, 46 ducks, and 30 quail. Sounds like they had a pretty good 2-week hunting spree. 1879, the first general game law is enacted in Texas. So 1879. Also in 1879, the Corpus Christi Free Press reports, one day this week, a boat arrived from Bird Island, 22 miles south of here, with a novel cargo, the skins and oil of some 3,000 pelicans. Wow, 3,000 pelicans gone. So 1885, bison had disappeared from Texas plains with the exception of a small herd protected by Charles Goodnight out in Clarendon, what is now Clarendon, Texas. 1895, the Office of Fish and Oyster Commission is created to manage marine fisheries. 1903, a 5-year closed season enacted on pronghorn antelope and bighorn sheep. The bag limit was set at 6 whitetail buck for a 2-month season. So that's 1903. And we're going to talk about that 1903 a little more in a minute. 1905, a biological survey of Texas is published by a guy named Vernon Bailey. 1907, a game department is added to the Fish and Oyster Commission in order to sell hunting licenses. 1919, waterfowl and shorebirds were first protected with a closed season and bag limit of 25. 6 game wardens were employed by the commission statewide to enforce these laws. So game wardens have only been around a little over 100 years. That's pretty crazy. 1925, the first state game preserves are created. 1933, the federal government purchased over 500,000 acres of land in East Texas for national forests. 1932, white-tailed deer restocking begins to prevent extirpation of the species in Texas. 1944, Big Bend National Park is created. 1948, this is a date that we're going to talk about a little bit. The last jaguar was killed in Texas near Kingsville. The cats had been exceedingly rare since the turn of the 20th century. 1963, the Game, Fish, and Oyster Commission is consolidated under the new Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. Also in 1963, available money and political will jumpstarts the start of the golden age of state park acquisition. The acreage under protection expands tenfold over 25 years in many state parks we know and love. And then the final date, 1970, the last gray wolf is killed in West Texas. So now let's talk about a few of these, right? So, I mean, this is interesting. And I tell y'all, go to this wildtexashistory.com. It is so cool reading through this stuff. So I'm going to take some excerpts kind of from this website. So let's talk about that last jaguar in Texas. So on April 25th, 1948, page 8 of the Corpus Christi Caller-Times unceremoniously reports the killing of a large jaguar on a farm near Kingsville, Texas. At the time, they didn't realize this individual was the last of Texas's big cats. The jaguar was killed by Richard Cuavas, who was out hunting for rabbits on Santa Gertrudis Creek. Gosh, sorry. I'm tired, guys. Somewhere near present-day Dick Kleberg Park. So the actual article reads this. South Texas has everything, even jaguars. But there's one less jaguar in this area now after Richard Cuavas, worker on the Bob Ferguson dairy farm near Kingsville, killed one of the big cats recently. Cuavas had gone into the brush near the Ferguson home hunting rabbits. He carried only a .410 gauge shotgun, a weapon that is fine for shooting rabbits, but miserably inadequate for big game like jaguars. He spotted the cat crouching behind a cactus plant, and without much ado, he cracked down on the animal with a charge from his rabbit gun. Stunned, shocked, and perhaps blinded by the volley of small shot from Cuavas' gun, the jaguar began running in circles and soon climbed a tree. Cuavas realized the prowess of his adversary by this time, left the cat up in the tree while he went for a bigger gun. At the Ferguson home, which was nearby, Cuavas borrowed a rifle and went back to finish off the jaguar. Val Lehman, conservationist and wildlife specialist for the King Ranch, identified the animal as a jaguar. The jaguar is among the larger specimens of the feline family, and his native habitat extends from Texas down to Paraguay. It has a larger head, heavier body, and shorter, thicker legs with the leopard or the cougar. It is brownish, yellow, or buff, marked with black spots. According to Mrs. Sue Ford of Ricardo, the jaguar killed by Cuavas measured 5 feet 10.5 inches overall. Its maximum belly girth was 3 feet and it was 30 inches tall. The animal weighed about 121 pounds. The Ferguson Dairy Farm, where the jaguar was killed, is 3 miles southeast of Kingsville. When Quavez was asked why he wasn't afraid to shoot such a big cat with a 410 gauge shotgun, he said that under the circumstances he figured he could outrun the animal if it showed any inclination to chase him. Fortunately for him, the jaguar took to the tree and Quavez had time to bring up heavier artillery. So panthers, large bobcat, lynxes, and other members of the feline family are not uncommon in the brush country of South Texas, but the jaguar killed by Quavez is the first that has been seen so near a farm home in some time. So by the 1940s, this is a little added on. So by the 1940s, there were no breeding jaguars left in Texas. So this cat probably came north along the coast, looking for territory. Val Lehman, the wildlife biologist at the King Ranch, performed the autopsy and described it as fat as butter, though its stomach only contained the partial remains of a raccoon. He also noted that Quavez's first shot blinded the cat in both eyes, while the second killed it after almost taking off its jaw. What a short and gruesome end to the jaguar's long history in Texas. Kind of a sad way to go, I guess. Just my thoughts. So what about grizzly bears in Texas? Yep. We used to have them. And there's a great article on wildtexashistory.com, but it's really long. And yeah, I didn't put it in my podcast because it's really long. But y'all can go read it on its own. It's there. What about wolves? Well, here we go. Mexican gray wolves held out in Texas until around 1970, when the last two were killed in the Big Bend region of Texas. According to Rick Labello, the education coordinator of the El Paso Zoo, the last confirmed sightings of Mexican wolves in the United States were in 1970, when the two wolves were trapped and killed in West Texas. One wolf was documented on the Cathedral Mountain Ranch, approximately 17 miles south of Alpine, Texas, and 64 miles north of Big Bend National Park. That's pretty much all there was to see on that. I thought there would be more pomp and circumstance to it, but it was like, nope. That's pretty much it. What about black bears? So black bears people don't really think of a whole lot here in Texas, but we've actually been getting some sightings down in the Big Bend area. We have heard there were sightings out on the Wagner Ranch just west of where I live in Vernon, Texas. And Vernon is about 50 miles west of where I live here. So here's a quick story from 1957. A black bear was spotted in rural Hidalgo County near McAllen in 1957. And the county sheriff's department was mobilized to catch it. I just find that hilarious. All right, boys, load up. We're going to go catch a brown bear. Or a black bear. Like, what were they going to do? Fortunately, it snuck across the border in time to evade its pursuers. Not much else happens in the story, but it's really interesting that in 1957, there were still bears this far south along the Rio Grande. I do find that interesting. Unfortunately, border wall construction and development would likely prohibit movement into Hidalgo County by Mexican bears today. So, and I assume that the bears aren't really good about going up to Border Patrol and seeing if they can get across. Pronghorn antelope were another one. We see them out in West Texas, but you really don't see them that much until you get out into New Mexico. But they were once in the millions or more. But they had dwindled to just a few thousand in 1903, and they put the pronghorn hunts that they used to hold on hold to help kind of rebuild the population, but then they didn't resume the hunts until 41 years later in 1944. And they do still have a pronghorn antelope season, mostly out in West Texas and in the Panhandle. The other crazy, stupid one, and really this is the last animal I'm going to talk about on here, ocelots. Ocelots are kind of smaller, kind of like bobcats, but they do look very distinctly different. It's a small cat. And I've never seen an ocelot around here. I have seen, not a jaguar, but I've seen a cougar out at Camp Perkins, apparently cruising up and down the Red River. And so, anyway, but ocelots were another series that were talked a lot about on this website. Apparently, they were all over the place, with a bunch being shot right here in North Texas, all up and down the Red River. Like I said, I've never seen one here myself, but I assume they might be pretty well hunted out or running around in small populations that aren't seen anymore. And like I said, we've seen signs, we've seen tracks on Camp Perkins, which is right on the Red River, north and east of Wichita Falls. And one day, probably somewhere around 2008, we were going into the trading post. Me and the camp ranger, we were out at camp. I was helping him with some stuff. It was just he and I. And we had pulled up on the other side of the big pavilion we've got down there. We were going into the trading post. And I look up and I distinctly remember going, holy shit. And Steve, our camp ranger at the time, who's since passed away, stopped and said, what? And I said, there's a big ass black cougar over there. And he said, what? And he stepped back out. And sure enough, this cougar just comes walking out of the brush, walked about, I don't know, 25 yards our way, which, I mean, it was still like 150, 200 yards away. And then just hung a left, walked right back into the woods, and disappeared. Never saw another one, but I did hear the scream once. That the noise that they make, it's not like a meow. It's like loud and it's scary. And so I heard that once when I was a kid out there, scared the crap out of all of us. And yeah, but ocelots, never seen them. So, that puts us at a little shorter podcast this week, and I hope you guys don't mind. It is late on a Tuesday night. I left the house this morning at 8 o'clock. I made it back by the house maybe a handful of times, but no more than 10 minutes each time because I was just blowing and going all day. So I am whooped. But I know my good buddy, City Councilman Michael Battolino, and many other people said that they miss it when I miss my podcast. And so I feel compelled to get this done. It's 10 o'clock at night. So for those of y'all who appreciate the podcast, thank you. I hope you appreciate the fact that I'm doing this at 10 o'clock at night. So what do y'all think? Let me know what other weird or off-the-wall interesting Texas history you'd like to hear about. I want to thank our sponsors again, Me and Victory Home Loans. Keep in mind, if you know someone moving to or in Texas or Oklahoma, send them my way to themichaelmitchell.com, THEMichaelmitchell.com. Remember, we sell dreams, not mortgages. Thank you all for tuning in to episode number 80 of Once Upon a Time in Texas. As always, remember, the stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Y'all have a great week.